Hello and welcome to SimCast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name is Dr. Lawrence Hill and I'm joined today by my regular co-host, Tony Jeremy.
Hello everyone, my name's Tony Jeremy. Welcome back to SimCast.
So we're super excited today because today we've got a really exciting, high-profile simulation guest who we're going to introduce you to now.
Lawrence, what's happened?
So, this is like really embarrassing, but basically we had an initial meeting following an amazing talk that we saw at a simulation conference. We met with this individual, they're incredible, they're so sparky and influential in the field of simulation, and we met, we talked about an outline.
We did our normal thing,
episode.
didn't we? We had our initial pre-meeting, drew up an episode. We've been super excited about it. I was giddy as a school kid coming in.
Exactly, me too. I've been skipping around for days thinking about today, and it got to like sort of just after 9:30. We were expecting them to be here, and like, maybe they've dropped us an email, and I thought I just better check the calendar invite.
Someone forgot to invite them to the calendar invite. So.
And so it took me fully like half an hour to just stop shaking my head.
So what I'm going to do, because we don't have a guest and it's going to be an episode with just Lawrence and myself, I'm going to resume my normal position on the other side of the desk. So just give me 2 seconds.
And so while Tony's doing that, I just want to say a very, very warm welcome to this episode of SimCast, When Simulation Goes Wrong. So I guess Tony and I were talking about this afterwards, and
put my cans on.
It's as frustrating and deeply frustrating as it is for me. We are educators, and actually, how often do you, as an educator, say to learners, like, it's not really about what happens, it's what you take away from the event afterwards and what you learn from it that counts. So we're going to try and take a leaf out of our own book.
It speaks my language. I'm a human factors geek. I was teaching human factors yesterday, actually, funnily enough, to a group of third-year nurses. And this is it's a human error, isn't it? It's but you beat yourself up about it.
I have, but what we know, and when we're talking about this theoretically rather than from our own cock-ups, what we say is that this is a natural, like, error is a natural emergent property. A latent property of complex systems.
Of which simulation is one of them.
So this episode explores the inevitability of things going wrong in simulation and uses a light-hearted, real-world, kind of grounded in our own experience way of trying to articulate what it's like to operate in a complex system and what we can learn.
And we'll try and bring some pragmatism and some stories and things that have happened to us along the way.
That's the idea, yeah.
If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a like. Equally so, if you didn't like the episode, give us a dislike. But let us know in the comments why, because we're always keen to improve. To keep up to date with all things Sim, subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to check the notification bell. And SimCast is available on all popular streaming platforms. So, I mean, I don't want to focus too much. Well, I do. I get great satisfaction from seeing you squirm and wriggle in your own mistakes. But equally so, as a human factors enthusiast, I'm conscious that it happens to the best of us. You know, James Reason once said, quoted that sometimes the best people make the worst mistakes. I'm certainly not calling you a best person, but, you know, we are all subject to these kind of errors.
Well, Reason also says something along the lines of the healthcare error paradox, right? That healthcare is inherently error provoking, and yet we find error to be absolutely something which is extremely difficult to talk about and to accept.
Yeah.
So,
and you did that, like, you were gutted when you made that mistake.
Gutted,
and I said to you, "Come on, let's just go and get a coffee. Let's go and have a chat." And move on from there. It reminds me of the basic assumption, which we assert at the beginning of every simulation session, that you're an intelligent, competent human being. You're here because you want to do your best, and importantly, regardless of outcome. So if it goes wrong for whatever reason,
or doesn't happen at all,
there's still something to learn from.
There is. There absolutely is, and that, I think, is where we want to start. Is this whole myth of error-free, the myth of perfect simulation. Operating in a complex environment, there is no such thing. Things go. They don't often happen so catastrophically that the whole thing doesn't happen. But it's more often than not, there are things that go a bit pear-shaped for whatever reason.
Yeah. So there's a lot of working parts, isn't there? When you set up a simulation event, it will inevitably be resource intensive. So you're going to need a lot of staff. There's going to be a lot of organisation. If we apply our site model for complex systems navigation, you've got the spaces, the information that you need to look at, the team, the people that are involved, and the equipment. All of those can go wrong, can't they?
And they can all go wrong because they interface with each other in unpredictable ways. And I guess we're going to walk through some of that today. I guess it's sending the calendar invite to the guest for the episode I think we would probably qualify that as a sort of team information interface problem, right?
Yeah.
Because the location, the invite, the episode schedule is all pieces of information which are essential for the episode of SimCast to go ahead, but also it requires a human to operate Microsoft Outlook effectively.
And when you look at human factors...
So it's a team information interface.
Thinking, and when you look at human failure, you've got two broad overarching types, haven't you? You've got genuine human error, when your intention was to do the right thing, but for whatever reason you did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got a violation, which is where you've knowingly done something wrong.
Yeah.
You clearly don't sit into that category. So it was genuine human error. And we were thinking about a little bit off camera. That's kind of then divided into action-based errors and thinking-based errors.
Yeah.
I would call this a memory-based lapse.
Yeah, it's a lapse. It's definitely a lapse rather than a slip. It was something that was not done, because of a lapse in memory or lapse in thinking.
When we try and write and develop scenarios, we sometimes purposefully put these elements in to pressure test learners. That balance of mixing practical skills with non-technical skills, with introducing an element of human factors, which again in simulation is seen as a really nice way to integrate that into the theory element of a higher education program. But the net effect is still the same. You still exhibit the same raw human response when something goes wrong.
Yeah, and everyone listening who's responsible for organising and facilitating simulation will recognise that there are multiple ways that
there's always an email that goes wrong, isn't it? That forgets to get delivered, or it ends up in your outbox. I forgot. Well, I didn't forget. I put an equipment request into our technical team a couple of weeks ago for a session that ran last week that someone was running for me. I sent the invite to the person that was running the session, but I didn't send the calendar request, which is how we do our booking system, to the technical team. So they didn't have the heads up that I needed a load of equipment, and understandably,
all of the technicians that listen to this podcast are all like,
exactly.
No, that's not. But it's emergent again, isn't it? It's come out of trying to get everything right and just think, all right, I think that's all done, and how many times is it the communication bit, the final step, the human, the squidgy organic grey matter bit that has to do something, which is the result, which leads to the error. Yeah, of course, equipment can go wrong.
Well, you say grey matter not because you're salt and pepper on up top.
More salt and pepper these days, mate. But no, it's definitely the grey. Talking of grey matter, complete segue. I read an article this morning on the BBC about grey matter changes in pregnancy. And I just thought it was really interesting. This is a complete segue. This has got nothing to do with simulation.
It's not a segue; it's a tangent. It's what it is.
But it was so interesting because it said that in this study they'd done in women during pregnancy is that there's up to 5% changes in grey matter material, and that actually it's really interesting because so many people you use this kind of baby brain thing, and I feel like I've lost a bit of cognitive function today. So I guess there's an element of empathy in there. But it's so interesting that there's actual physical changes associated with pregnancy in the brain.
That is interesting.
Makes real sense.
I'm going to try and claw us back
to the learning outcomes,
the agenda. But actually, I'm going to try and segue back just to try and. But we were talking also when we went for coffee after we realised that we'd made this muck up. We were talking both about the fact that as busy academics, there is a lot of stuff going on in both of our professional roles at the minute. And again, what you're doing is you're just increasing all of those factors, all of those human factors, which mean that you're more likely to make those errors.
Yeah. And how true is that of everyone listening to this podcast? And we've talked about simulation as a sort of a side hustle before, and trying to squeeze it into amidst everything else that you do. And it just adds to the sense of complexity, which is why we advocate for the site model for organising and planning simulation, but it's not bulletproof.
No, it's not. It helps you remember the things that often get forgotten, but whenever you have human input, there is always going to be the inevitability of some degree of human error. So again, if you looked at it from a human factors thinking point of view, the most effective way to try and prevent this from happening is to try and design a solution that makes it easy to do the right thing and hard or difficult to do the wrong thing. So that would be maybe like a management system where it would trigger to say that you haven't invited the guest for whatever reason. And then it's barriers, mitigations, and education and training, or just trying to be better as an individual. So what we're trying to do is the least effective way to make it bulletproof.
Yeah. And that's so often the way, isn't it? You see that in systems all the time, is that, focus on the individuals that have made the mistakes rather than on the system that allowed those conditions to exist in the first place. So I'm not sure. Like, what do we do then? So if we're gonna try and take some learning from this, how do we, in a meaningful way, translate this failure into learning about how to better organise?
The best thing to do is try and understand the many ways in which things can go wrong. Because if you understand what can go wrong and why those things go wrong, you've got a better idea of then thinking about how you might have a solution to it. In some instances, you might not have a solution. So I'm just trying to think of a foolproof way where you can add someone to an invite to a calendar. It requires manual human input. Yep. So unless you then put in a barrier or mitigation, a checklist or something like that, but then you run the risk of having
to check it as well.
Checklist fatigue and doing stuff like that.
Because it's not that. So we've had a couple of never events now.
I tell you one thing that we don't have is we don't have a clear process map of what we do, and that might make things better.
Yeah, that's true.
That you could then design stop points where it might be that I have to check, or you have to check the work that we've done.
It's the second operator phenomena, isn't it? It's the having someone check the medicine before you
which
administer
doesn't mean it's foolproof, because again, my clinical background being operating theatres retain swabs and instruments inside patients, which is a two-person check. Still happens a heck of a lot of the time. But
ODPs work in teams to count to 5.
Yeah. As long as you can count to 5, you're good to go.
But we've had, but that's a never event in a clinical context. Leaving a swab or losing a swab, even
not inviting a guest is a never event in a podcast.
Not inviting a guest or not pressing record.
I really don't like the term never event.
No, I don't. It's bullshit, isn't it? Let's face it. The term never event should not exist, because actually the fact that it's happened implies that it's not a never event.
But the fact that also that you're relying on human input is just understanding that humans get things wrong, and then we should accept error as normal. Means that you can't use the term never.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a plug to anyone in clinical practice who has to get involved with never events. Let's try and remove that terminology, because it's archaic.
And I guess the reason that it matters, that we should talk about kind of making simulation systems more humanistic and making them more resilient and making them more sort of both humanistic and systematized, is because, yes, all right, nobody has a swab left in their abdomen if we make a mistake in a simulation session, but it does impact on very real things like esteem, for example. It can affect learning, and ultimately it might result in an impact on patient safety because learning outcomes are not met in a realistic way. So there is a good reason for talking about applying human factors principles to the organisation of simulation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst we should strive for as good as possible, I think we need to be kind on ourselves that we will never reach perfection. There's always things to improve, even just from the normal learning process of it. But also embrace the fact that will inevitably get things wrong. So what can go wrong then? So if we look at our site model as a way to sort of work our way through these different things, so space, physical space and location.
Yeah.
An obvious one for us, which we're currently going through, is a complex timetabling and planning program within the university.
It's competition for those spaces.
Thousands of slots that need to be booked. I'll give you another practical example. So our lead technician who deals with the timetabling projects pulled me to one side via a Teams message to try and sort out some clashes that I had. And then I've quickly realised that my input data, some of the dates, because I did a copy pasta fail, were incorrect. So I hadn't booked the right space for the right time.
Right.
Luckily, I was able to. I tend to be very accommodating when I make those mistakes. I'm like, I'll go in the cupboard. It's fine.
Yeah, we can.
Unfortunately, I've got a program small enough where that can happen.
So there's definitely failure can occur around that, and the thing is as well, those failures will happen well out of sight of the actual learning and teaching event itself. So we're talking about organising and scheduling roomings in the December of the year before that academic year starts. So let's say December 2025 is when we were planning the rooms for September 2026. So a small, probably human variability related mistake or error at that stage results in impact on learning for learners from September right the way through to June of the following year. The year after that, June 27. So a mistake in December 25 has a real world implication in June 27.
And I guess it depends with the space thing and the surroundings and your physical space that you've got. It depends completely on what you've got available as to what the ramifications and the consequences are. I can normally find somewhere else to do my sim if I don't get the space that I either haven't booked through an error or hasn't been made available to me.
Or it's been double booked by some other mistake.
But if it's the only sim space in your organisation and it's double booked or you've made an error, that might mean more of a catastrophic error.
That's a critical stop, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a
no-go criteria.
No-go criteria. No space is a no-go criteria. Yeah.
Have you been able to have an error like that and not cover it up, but rescue it so it doesn't affect the learners?
With space? No, I think there's always been, but again, it's like how much of a compromise have you had to make? I don't ever remember having a sim session. It was like, actually, do you know what, everyone? We haven't got a room. You need to go home. I don't ever remember having to do that, but we've probably had to cram more learners into a space or use suboptimal spaces or. I talk about this on our sim instructor course. I talk about when we're planning simulation having the gold standard. Yeah.
And that basically means I've done everything right. I've done all my bookings ahead of time. I'm terrible. I'm awful at booking people and doing equipment bookings and stuff. I would like to blame that my other workload, but there's also part of it which is just I've forgotten. So that's my gold standard if I remember to do everything. And there's the absolute minimum I can get away with, which is often me on my own because I've got a smaller cohort.
Sorry, but the thing that just came to mind there was Ken Spearpoint's voice talking about performance variability, that it's performance variability like in a negative sense, which has led to the rooms not being available in some way. But it's the same human performance variability which then makes a bad situation okay by adapting and overcoming. And that's that's like kind of really was a really strong message I took away from the learning I did on Ken's Masters in Simulation, was actually it's the human variability that so often mitigates the gaps in effective systems. And we just when it works, you're like, oh, of course, that's great. But when that performance variability is what leads to the error becoming apparent, it's like really negative. Whereas how often has your individual performance variability allowed sessions to continue and to be successful and for learning to occur?
Yeah.
And yet we focus on when it goes pear-shaped.
Yeah, it's pretty stressful, and there's a lot of scurrying around on the day. I think is that performance variability, isn't it? It's like, oh, what am I going to do? I don't think I've ever had to pull the plug on something. I'm quite lucky that I've got smaller cohorts, so I don't have to rely on multiple rooms and multiple people to still make things happen.
But it's a source of enormous
me
stress.
running up and down the corridor.
Yeah, and
so that I can be the facilitator and a debriefer.
Fair. So okay, so spaces, and I'm sure everyone else can think of other ways. Like spaces, like water, like if there's a leak, or there's other ways that spaces can go wrong. The lights don't work.
Our simulation centre flooded, didn't it, a year or two ago? And luckily, none of the simulation spaces were affected, but the lecture theatre was, which is a big debriefing space. And that was out of action for a long, long time, wasn't it?
It was.
Had a knock-on effect. Information.
Right, and I think there's so much in here. This is
a big area.
Because I always think about infrastructure as well as being information in this I gap. And we've talked about it a little bit already. So it's all of the comms that can either not be received or kind of be a bit
again, if we thought about
misleading.
How do we design that better, things like email templates, having a process map so that you can clearly identify, particularly for maybe junior staff who are new to organising sim, that there is a process that needs to be followed.
Yeah, because if we take a human factors kind of lens from an aviation context, for example, if you're kind of being asked to operate an extremely complicated piece of machinery and get it off the ground safely and fly it safely and land it safely, you're not just going to be expected to do that without any kind of checklist to work against. It's like, right.
But checklist and briefing as well. So the way that checklists are used in aviation is perhaps a little bit different from how checklists are used in healthcare. They're either used to go through really important criteria that have to be checked prior to takeoff, for example, so sort of safety critical things, or they are used as a cognitive aid in the event of an emergency. Whereas in healthcare, I think we have a tendency to have oversaturation of checklists, which then has a detrimental effect on them because they don't then serve the purpose that they first intended.
I've seen several that look more like infographics than like checklists.
So like checklists
like
are
wild
useful.
colours and like sort of stuff on them that's just like really distracting actually, rather than a linear A, B, C, D, E,
But
F.
I think a checklist for planning simulation pre-event would be useful.
Yeah.
That is a useful way so that you can go through the different steps and make sure they don't get forgotten. Like include
Send
the participant to the calendar invite.
Send invites to
We've both done it, but
guests.
Perhaps my technical team are just as important as the guest that we're going to have on. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
So my mistake is just as important as yours.
So information that, I mean, we could, how much of this do we want to get into? We can have the kind of the quality and depth of the learning outcomes that underpin the simulation. That's another example of how information can compromise
something that we,
or a lack of learning outcomes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's something that we've learned as we've done our simulation instructor courses. Is just because you work in academia doesn't mean that you're going to provide really thorough, decent outcomes.
Or in education, in any context, but especially for us, it's been quite an eye opener to give academic teams. So just write us 2 simple learning outcomes for a basic life support instruction session.
But the consequences
it's not easy.
The consequences from an educational point of view, if you don't have a good learning outcome in simulation, is it means there's a lack of structure to your briefing. And it means there's a lack of structure to your debrief as well. So it actually means there's a lack of coherent structure all the way through the simulation. Then simulation just becomes simulation as spectacle. Look what we can do in the simulation activity phase rather than what's the learning from it.
Completely agree. And also your learning outcomes are going to have a direct impact on the equipment that you need and the team that you want to access as well, and the space that you want. So actually, if you don't have those outcomes right, the whole system starts to fall down because you don't know what you're trying to achieve.
A notable mention then for learning outcomes.
Notable mention for learning outcome. Yeah, almost like we've mentioned it for the first time, talking about learning outcomes.
Oh, they're bloody droning on about learning outcomes again.
Rosie's always like, back to Rosie's bonfire of outcomes. But so information, obviously critical. And the next kind of stop in the site model is team.
Yeah, another important interaction. I think you'll have a natural information team interface with a lot of those potential errors as well. When simulation goes wrong, I guess you've got the unpredictability of human behavior as a facilitator, whether they can even turn up in the first instance. You can always have sickness or other reasons why people might not. That's
Traffic.
But that's going to be a fly in the ointment, isn't it? And then you've got all of the variables in terms of whether your simulated patients go to script or go rogue. There's all different areas and where the team can effectively derail your simulation activity or event.
Yeah, absolutely. And
saying the wrong thing in the debrief.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like just crashing the psychological safety in the debrief, or
often not from a bad place. No, but just kind of sloppiness.
Yeah, easily done. And the team as well, including the learners as well. So, where things can go wrong. So, for example from my practice just last week or a couple of weeks ago, norms emerge in a program about how learners are notified about where they need to be for simulation. So we have a timetabling system which gives information to students. We then have a Blackboard timetable that tells them whether they're in person or online or whatever. Okay. We have we can email the students via the announcements page on the Blackboard site, but
which
also
you can forget to check the box that goes out as an email as well.
You can forget to do that. Error. And then there's also a section of the Blackboard site that talks about the simulation and practice-based learning, and also in there, module organisers will tend to post where they want students to go.
Where are they going first?
Right. So. And so I was organising a session in my module, and I sent the students a message, basically a super clear message on the announcement that just said, for your information, February whatever it was, group X, half the group, 0900, and then the room name. And then underneath 1300, group Y, the room name.
They didn't all turn up to the right session.
Have a guess how many turned up. So there's 20, 24, 25 in each group. Have a guess how many turned up in each AM and PM group. 2. Because because the norm was that they look on this section of Blackboard that says, this is where. So actually, that was a team. So
you're throwing in rogue requests.
I basically, because I didn't do what everyone else in the team is doing. I basically, even though I'd communicated the information quite clearly, I just didn't do it in the format that was the norm.
Basic breakdown in communication, isn't it? Sender and receiver. If the message doesn't get across, then the communication doesn't work.
Yeah,
and even if it makes perfect sense in your mind.
Yeah.
And you were like, yeah, I've done a really good job.
I don't think objectively it made perfect sense. Like it couldn't have been any clearer. It just wasn't the norm for how that information is communicated. So yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, it was all right in the end because they knew to come to the centre, and then students gravitate to the social space. So it wasn't that difficult just to sort of send someone down and say, can you bring everyone up? And they were like, yeah, it was fine. So again, it wasn't a stop point. But it was an example of how team can derail the sim.
Okay, last one's equipment. So again, we've talked about this recently in another episode where we've had equipment failures. That's the obvious one to think about. Equipment requests.
Yeah.
So again, an equipment information interface there. Yeah, just unfamiliarity, particularly as we move to more and more software-based technology, where you might just get a software update. We've had instances where software hasn't updated because the university interface, so the IT systems at the university and the specific system that we've procured might not have worked together with an update, for example.
Right.
I've had that before. You turn into the simulation center and the SMOT system isn't working because they've done an update on the UEA systems.
Yeah.
And now that means that our main way of delivering simulation doesn't work in the simulation center. And just think,
there you go.
And then you're scurrying around trying to contact IT to try and get it sorted.
So that's quite a nice example of where, like, if we consider that SMOT's like the kind of streaming software to be an example of equipment, it has a very real impact on your ability to deliver the learning outcomes. So that's equipment that relates to information. It then also relates to space, because you've presumably booked 2 rooms that you can link via streaming. So actually, if you didn't have that option, you might have picked one big room where you could get everybody in and they could observe. So the equipment has had an impact on space. The equipment is also having an impact on team and information, because you've got to speak to the IT team, you've got to speak to all the sorts. So it just is a really nice example of how we operate in complex systems when we organize simulation. It is not safe as a learning space, because there are so many variables that can go wrong. High level of risk, but a high level of reward too. And I think, the very real human cost, as I felt for half an hour shaking my head, at the beginning of today, is that actually you feel like, as the educator, you feel like you've let the side down. But actually the reality is that you operate in this like massively messy, complex space, and it's natural.
We're not very good, are we, at looking after ourselves when things like that happen, and cutting ourselves a little bit of slack. And yet, as simulation educators, that is the primary focus for what we try and achieve with a well-facilitated debrief. So perhaps we need to have a taste of our own medicine in that regard. So that, I guess, moves us quite nicely onto the last bit, which is, when it all goes wrong, can it be recovered? And more importantly, can we still learn from it? Because, again, we would say, with the basic assumption, our little appendage to it on the end, which we always talk about, is regardless of outcome. Because, when you run a simulation event, the learner turns up, they obviously want to do their best. They want it to be faultless. Often it's not, because it's messy and it's complex, and they're putting multiple skills together, both technical and non-technical. And then they're going to beat themselves up in the debrief. You've basically had a real life version of that this morning. And you exhibited exactly how the learners often do, which is you beat yourself up. So in one word, sum up what this morning's...
in one word. Humbling.
Okay, interesting.
And I say humbling, if I may be permitted, just to step into some analysis, because we try really hard, don't we? We perform the role of educator, we perform the role of organizer, we perform the role of director of simulation and clinical skills. And actually, with the assumption with that performance is always that what underpins it is something which is kind of robust and kind of and reliable. But actually, we are just as everyone is vulnerable to mistake making, and actually it doesn't mean that your competence is glassy and shatters. Actually, it's anti-fragile. If you can accept the fact that the errors and the mistakes are part of the system and part of who you are, and that you can grow and develop from them, actually they become part of a more resistant system. Because actually what we're doing, and to answer your question, is can you learn from it? We've just talked for the last half an hour about how this has triggered us to think in a more deep way about how these systems apply.
If I had to use one word about your experience this morning, I would actually, the word I would use is experienced. And my reason for that is, when you recognized that you had made an error, you definitely showed experience in how to deal with that.
Because I've messed up so bad.
No, it wasn't.
But it was a retrieval.
It was a retrieval. And what was really interesting was listening to you use that experience and that depth of understanding to change your frame of reference. You said, for this individual who we haven't invited, from their perspective, we've had a really fizzy initial conversation, I think was the term that you used. Generated a load of great ideas with the potential for maybe multiple episodes, because of the amount of things that we were talking about.
Collaborations.
And then it went from their perspective silent, because we didn't send the invite out. And it takes experience to understand it from that viewpoint, that for that individual, we've gone radio silent. And actually what we need to do is, firstly, just fall on our sword and admit our mistakes, but try and recover it in such a way that it doesn't look like that.
Do you know what's really nice is that because we haven't revealed who this person is, but because we know that they understand that systems are complex and messy, it feels a little bit better. But hopefully, when we do get this person into the studio in due course, we can perhaps revisit this slightly and and talk about it then. But no, thank you, Tony. Thanks for the opportunity to publicly kind of interrogate how,
this is seemingly
therapy.
This is a little bit therapy.
I feel lighter. But no, it genuinely, hopefully, it resonates.
Actually, genuinely, do you feel safe having this conversation? Because if we go back to simulation, psychology and psychological safety, that's an important aspect.
Well, it is, and you don't normally hold your debrief in front of an audience that you can't see and that might, judge you, and that's fine. And I'm happy to be judged, and I think that's a marker.
But I don't think they will, because I think, as niche as our topic is, that we often, that we talk about every fortnight. The people hopefully watching will have an appreciation and understanding, and will probably have lived experiences. In
Absolutely.
The same regard.
No, I feel safe in your hands, everyone. So thank you for this extended debrief, but hopefully also what we've talked about through, how we can integrate the site model to try and mitigate some of this, but also how ultimately we need to be, as you were saying, kind to ourselves and accept that. To err is human, and to forgive, divine. That's a really important thing that we need to bear in mind. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and thank you, Tony, because I really enjoyed that.
My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.